March 2, 1944, 28,000 feet above Berlin, Major Heinz Baer, Germany's sixth-ranking ace with 204 victories, rolled his Focke-Wulf FW-190 into attack position on what appeared to be another vulnerable American bomber formation. Through the crystal-clear canopy of his fighter, he counted 16 B-17 flying fortresses laboring through German airspace, their condensation trails marking their path like arrows pointing to targets. Baer had developed tactics for bomber interception over 3 years of brutal combat. Approach from the sun, attack the formation's edges, kill the stragglers, then disengage before escorts could react. The mathematics had worked for 204 previous victories. What Baer didn't see, what German radar hadn't detected, were the 8 P-51 Mustangs flying 3,000 feet above the bombers in brilliant sunlight. The new American long-range fighter had only entered combat 3 months earlier, but it was already rewriting the rules of air warfare over Germany. As Baer committed to his attack dive, Lieutenant James Goodson of the 4th Fighter Group pushed his Mustang's throttle forward and rolled into pursuit. The P-51's Packard-built Merlin engine responded with 1,695 horsepower, accelerating the fighter to 440 miles per hour in seconds. Goodson's 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns, 3 in each wing, were already armed and ready, and Baer was lining up his shot on a trailing B-17 when tracers streamed past his canopy. Impossible. American escorts didn't have the range to reach Berlin. He had studied the intelligence reports. P-47 Thunderbolts could barely reach the German border with drop tanks. Yet here was an American fighter not only over Berlin, but diving on him with speed his FIW-190 couldn't match. Baer instinctively broke right, using the Focke-Wulf's excellent roll rate to evade. But the American stayed with him, and then came the sound that would haunt surviving German pilots for the rest of their lives. The hammering roar of 6.50 caliber machine guns firing in unison, 80 rounds per second converging on his aircraft. The first burst missed, tracers walking across the sky where Baer had been a fraction of a second earlier. The second burst didn't miss. Goodson had compensated for Baer's evasion, leading the target perfectly. 6 streams of half-inch projectiles, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second, tore through the Focke-Wulf's thin aluminum skin. The concentrated fire shredded Baer's right wing, destroyed his aileron controls, and punched holes through his cockpit canopy. Only desperate aerobatics and the FW-190's rugged construction saved Baer's life as he dove away, trailing smoke and glycol coolant. He would survive, but his aircraft was finished. More importantly, his understanding of air combat over Germany was finished. The Americans had achieved what seemed impossible. They had brought long-range escort fighters that could outperform German fighters over their own capital. The era of German air superiority was ending, one shredded cockpit at a time. The story of how American 6-gun fighters devastated the Luftwaffe begins with a crisis in strategic bombing doctrine and ends with the systematic destruction of German fighter aviation. In 1943, American daylight precision bombing was failing catastrophically. The theory was elegant. Self-defending bomber formations would penetrate German airspace, destroy specific industrial targets with precision bombing, and return home with acceptable losses. The reality was brutal. German fighters, operating close to their bases with minimal fuel constraints, could attack bomber formations with devastating effectiveness. Without escort fighters that could stay with the bombers throughout their missions, losses were unsustainable. The numbers told the story of disaster. On October 14, 1943, during the second raid on Schweinfurt's ball-bearing factories, the 8th Air Force lost 60 B-17s from a force of 291 bombers, a 20.6% loss rate. Another 17 bombers were damaged beyond repair. Crew casualties exceeded 600 men killed, wounded, or captured in a single mission. At this loss rate, bomber crews had virtually no chance of surviving their required 25 mission tours. The strategic bombing campaign was on the verge of suspension. American commanders needed a solution, and they needed it immediately. The solution came from an unlikely source, a hybrid aircraft combining American industrial mass production with a British engine. The North American P-51 Mustang had been designed in 1940 to British specifications, but its original Allison engine limited high-altitude performance. In 1942, British engineers had the inspired idea of fitting the Mustang's excellent airframe with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the same power plant that drove the Spitfire. The result was transformational. The P-51B, powered by the Packard-built Merlin V1650, producing 1,695 horsepower, achieved performance that exceeded every German fighter at altitudes above 20,000 feet. But performance alone wouldn't save the bombers. The Mustang needed range, specifically the ability to escort bombers 850 miles from England to Berlin and back, a 1,700-mile mission. American engineers solved this through innovative fuel system design. Internal fuel capacity increased to 269 gallons through careful tank placement. Two 108-gallon drop tanks under the wings extended range to over 2,000 miles. Most ingeniously, the Mustang could use fuel from its drop tanks first, then switch to internal tanks for combat, arriving over German targets with full internal fuel and undiminished performance. No other fighter possessed this combination of range and combat capability. The armament that would shred German cockpits consisted of 6 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns, 3 mounted in each wing. This weapons package represented American firepower philosophy perfected through years of combat experience. Each gun fired 750 to 850 rounds per minute, generating a combined rate of approximately 4,800 rounds per minute or 80 rounds per second. The ammunition load, 1,880 rounds total, provided about 23 seconds of continuous fire, enough for multiple engagements before requiring rearmament. The .50 caliber projectile itself was a devastating combination of weight, velocity, and destructive payload. Each round weighed 1.7 ounces and left the gun barrel at 2,900 feet per second. The standard combat load mixed armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and ball ammunition in patterns optimized for different combat scenarios. Against aircraft targets, the armor-piercing rounds could penetrate engine blocks and structural components. The incendiary compound ignited fuel tanks and hydraulic lines. A 2-second burst, putting 160 rounds into the convergence zone, could disintegrate any Luftwaffe fighter. German aircraft designers had never anticipated such concentrated firepower from a single-engine fighter. The Bf 109, Germany's primary fighter, carried one 20mm cannon and two 13mm machine guns, providing devastating punch but limited ammunition, typically 200 rounds of 20mm and 600 rounds of 13mm. The FW190 carried four 20mm cannon and two 13mm machine guns in its heaviest configuration, superior armament but at significant cost to performance due to weight. Both German designs emphasized hitting power per round rather than sustained fire. They were optimized for bomber destruction, not fighter combat. The Mustang's 6.50 caliber installation was optimized for the opposite mission, killing fighters. The convergence was set at 300 yards, creating a cone of fire that any aircraft entering would face instant structural failure. The guns were bore-sighted to intersect at this distance, meaning all 6 ballistic paths met in a small area. The ammunition capacity meant American pilots could fire multiple bursts without worrying about running dry. This sustained firepower capability would prove decisive in combat, where German pilots had to be cautious with their limited cannon ammunition. The first P-51B Mustangs arrived in England in November 1943, equipping the 354th Fighter Group of the 9th Air Force. On December 1, 1943, they flew their first escort mission, accompanying bombers to targets near Calais. The Luftwaffe, expecting standard P-47 Thunderbolts that turned back at the German border, was unprepared for escorts that stayed with the bombers throughout the mission. German fighter controllers reported with alarm that American fighters were now accompanying bombers deeper into Germany than any previous escort. The psychological impact on German pilots was immediate. For 2 years, Luftwaffe fighter units had operated with the security of knowing they would eventually outlast American escorts. They could harry bomber formations until the P-47s reached their fuel limits and turned back, then attack with impunity. The Mustang destroyed this tactical certainty. German pilots now faced the possibility of American escorts anywhere in Germany, at any altitude, with performance matching or exceeding their own fighters. Major Günther Rahl, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories mostly on the Eastern Front, encountered Mustangs on his first mission over Berlin in March 1944. His after-action report captured the shock. The American escorts were waiting at altitude above the bombers. When we attacked, they dove on us with speed advantage. I attempted to engage one, but it easily outran my Bf-109 in level flight, then came back and nearly shot me down. The American pilot was competent but not exceptional. His aircraft's performance made him deadly. We shot down no bombers and lost 4 fighters. The technical specifications that made the Mustang dominant in combat with German fighters bore detailed examination. The Packard Merlin FIV 1650-7 engine, license-built from British designs with American manufacturing improvements, produced 1,695 horsepower at 3,000 RPM. This power drove the aircraft to a maximum speed of 437 miles per hour at 25,000 feet, faster than any German production fighter except the Me-262 jet. More critically, the Mustang maintained this performance at altitudes where German fighters struggled. At 30,000 feet, the Mustang could still achieve 410 miles per hour, while the Bf-109 managed only 360 miles per hour, and the FW-190 slowed to 350 miles per hour. The climb rate, 3,475 feet per minute at sea level, gave Mustang pilots the ability to gain altitude advantage rapidly. The service ceiling of 41,900 feet meant Mustangs could engage at altitudes where German fighters became sluggish and unresponsive. The range over 2,000 miles with drop tanks revolutionized escort operations. But these performance advantages only mattered because the Mustang could fight. The 6.50 caliber guns ensured that any German pilot caught in a Mustang's sights faced overwhelming firepower. The ammunition itself represented American industrial capacity operating at peak efficiency. Each .50 caliber round required 23 manufacturing steps from brass cup to finished cartridge. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri alone produced 30 million rounds monthly by 1944, enough to supply tens of thousands of Mustang sorties. Every round was manufactured to tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch, ensuring reliable feeding and consistent ballistics. This quality control meant American pilots could depend on their guns in ways German pilots flying aircraft with ammunition manufactured under bombing and material shortages could not. The first major demonstration of Mustang effectiveness came during Big Week, February 20th to 25th, 1944, when the 8th Air Force launched maximum effort raids against German aircraft production facilities. Over 6 days, American forces flew 3,800 bomber sorties and 3,673 fighter sorties, including 1,100 Mustang sorties. The Luftwaffe responded with everything available, committing 1,100 fighters daily to defend vital industrial targets. The resulting air battles were the most intense of the European war, and they demonstrated beyond doubt that the Mustang had achieved air superiority. During Big Week, Mustang pilots claimed 297 German aircraft destroyed for the loss of 28 P-51s to enemy fighters, a kill ratio exceeding 10-1. These weren't exaggerated claims, but verified kills confirmed by gun camera footage and ground witnesses. The 6.50 caliber installation proved devastatingly effective. Mustang pilot testimonies consistently described German fighters disintegrating under concentrated fire. The sustained rate of fire allowed American pilots to correct aim during the burst, walking their tracers onto target until strikes were observed. Lieutenant Urban Drew of the 361 Fighter Group described his first Mustang kill on February 20th. "I engaged an FW-190 at 26,000 feet over Brunswick. The German tried to dive away, but my Mustang was faster. I closed to 300 yards and fired a 3-second burst. All 6 guns were hitting. I watched pieces fly off his wing. Then his canopy shattered. The pilot bailed out immediately. The aircraft fell away in a spin. My guns had put perhaps 240 rounds into that fighter in 3 seconds. There was nothing left to hold together." The psychological impact of such encounters rippled through German fighter units. Pilots who had operated with confidence since 1940 now faced an opponent with superior performance and overwhelming firepower. German ace Major Gerhard Barkhorn, with 301 victories primarily on the Eastern Front, transferred west in early 1944 and encountered Mustangs over Berlin. He later wrote, "The American Mustang was a revelation. It could outrun us, outclimb us, and had fuel to fight as long as we did. Most frightening were those 6 heavy machine guns. When they fired, you could see the tracers converging. If you were in that cone, your aircraft came apart. I survived by never allowing myself to be caught in a Mustang's sights." The March 6, 1944 raid on Berlin provided the ultimate test of Mustang capabilities. For the first time, American heavy bombers struck Germany's capital with full fighter escort throughout the mission. The Luftwaffe committed 500 fighters to defend Berlin, knowing that failure to stop the bombers would demonstrate German inability to protect even their capital. The resulting air battle involved over 1,100 aircraft and became the largest fighter engagement over Germany during the war. 69 P-51 Mustangs of the 4th and 354th Fighter Groups accompanied the bombers to Berlin and engaged the massed Luftwaffe defenders. The Mustangs claimed 82 German fighters destroyed for the loss of 11 P-51s, a ratio exceeding 7 to 1. More significantly, the bombers successfully attacked their targets and returned home with fewer losses than previous unescorted raids. The strategic implications were immediate. If American fighters could escort bombers to Berlin itself, no German target was safe. The Luftwaffe could no longer prevent daylight bombing, regardless of fighter commitment. Individual Mustang pilots achieved ace status, 5 or more victories in single missions. Captain Don Gentile of the 4th Fighter Group destroyed 3 Bf-10-9s on March 8th, bringing his total to 21 victories, all in Mustangs. Lieutenant Colonel James Howard, flying alone after his flight separated, engaged 30 German fighters attacking bombers near Halberstadt on January 11th, claiming 6 destroyed and preventing bomber losses. Howard received the Medal of Honor, the only fighter pilot in the European theater so decorated. His achievement demonstrated that a skilled pilot in a Mustang could dominate multiple opponents through superior performance and firepower. The systematic destruction of German fighter aviation accelerated through spring 1944 as more Mustang groups became operational. By April, 8 fighter groups flew P-51s, putting over 400 Mustangs into German skies daily. German fighter losses climbed to unsustainable levels. In February 1944, the Luftwaffe lost 33% of its fighter pilots. In March, 56%. In April, 43%. These weren't just numbers, but experienced pilots who couldn't be replaced. German flight training, already truncated by fuel shortages, was producing pilots with 100 total flight hours compared to American pilots' 400 hours. The experience gap combined with the equipment gap to create a death spiral for German fighter aviation. The technical advantages Mustangs exploited went beyond raw performance. The P-51's visibility from the bubble canopy exceeded that of any German fighter. American pilots could see threats in all directions, while German pilots in Bf-109S had restricted rear visibility. The Mustang's control harmony, the way aileron, elevator and rudder forces balanced, made it easy to fly accurately, while German fighters required constant attention. The K-14 computing gun sight, introduced in late 1944, automatically calculated lead for deflection shots, making American gunnery more accurate. German pilots who survived Mustang encounters consistently cited the 6.50 caliber guns as their greatest fear. The firepower density was unlike anything German fighters carried. Unteroffizier Hans Hartigs, who survived being shot down twice by Mustangs, described his first encounter. "I was attacking bombers when a Mustang appeared on my wing. I tried to turn inside him, using the Bf-109's better turning radius. But he didn't turn with me. He just climbed away, then came back from above. When he fired, it sounded like a saw tearing metal. My cockpit filled with fragments. The instrument panel exploded. My left arm was hit. I bailed out immediately because staying in that aircraft meant death." The sustained fire capability particularly terrified German pilots accustomed to fighting with limited cannon ammunition. Mustang pilots could fire multiple long bursts without depleting their ammunition. German pilots had to be careful with every shot, knowing their 200 rounds of 20mm ammunition provided perhaps 15 seconds of firing time. This disparity meant American pilots could fire correction bursts, walking their fire onto target, while German pilots needed perfect aim on first shots. In the high-speed, high-stress environment of air combat, this advantage was decisive. By D-Day, June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe was a broken force. Over Normandy beaches, Allied aircraft flew 14,674 sorties on Invasion Day. The Luftwaffe managed 319 sorties, a ratio exceeding 46-1. This numerical disparity reflected the systematic destruction Mustangs had inflicted on German fighter aviation over the previous 6 months. The Luftwaffe couldn't defend Normandy because they had lost too many pilots and aircraft defending Germany against Mustang-escorted bomber raids. The production statistics supporting Mustang operations demonstrated American industrial capacity that German planners had never imagined possible. North American Aviation's Inglewood, California plant produced P-51s at peak rate of 16 aircraft daily. A second plant in Dallas, Texas added 8 daily. Total wartime production reached 15,586 P-51s, more than total German fighter production of all types during the same period. Each Mustang cost $50,985, expensive compared to other fighters but cheap compared to bomber losses it prevented. The ammunition production supporting Mustang operations was equally staggering. Each combat mission required 1,880 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition per aircraft. With 400 Mustangs flying daily by mid-1944, ammunition consumption exceeded 750,000 rounds per day. The Lake City Arsenal and 4 other facilities produced this ammunition without strain, demonstrating American industrial depth that German production, even under Albert Speer's rationalization, couldn't approach. German attempts to counter the Mustang threat focused on technological solutions because tactical adjustments had failed. The Me-262 jet fighter, operational from autumn 1944, could outrun the Mustang with its 540 miles per hour top speed, but production problems, fuel shortages and pilot training limitations meant only 200 Me-262s were operational simultaneously at peak deployment. Mustang pilots developed tactics for engaging jets, attacking during takeoff and landing when jets were vulnerable, and some achieved jet kills using superior numbers and positioning. The Focke-Wulf Tar 152, designed specifically to counter high-altitude American escorts, entered service too late and in too few numbers to affect outcomes. Only 67 were produced before war's end. The Messerschmitt Bf 109K, the ultimate piston engine version, had improved performance but still couldn't match the Mustang above 25,000 feet. Every German response came too late or in too few numbers to reverse the tide. Individual German aces' experiences illustrated the transformation from hunter to hunted. Adolf Galland, General of Fighters and Germany's fourth-ranking ace with 104 victories, flew combat missions in early 1945, commanding JV-44, an elite unit flying Me-262 jets. Even in jets, Galland recognized Mustang dominance. The American Mustang pilots were competent, aggressive, and well-led. They used altitude and numbers to compensate for our speed advantage. Most critically, they had fuel to stay with us throughout combat. We could run, but we couldn't escape. When caught by Mustangs while landing or takeoff, we were vulnerable. Their 6.50 caliber guns destroyed several of our jets on approach. Their kill ratios compiled from combat records demonstrated Mustang effectiveness beyond dispute. P-51 pilots claimed 4,950 enemy aircraft destroyed in air combat during the war, the highest total of any Allied fighter. The loss rate was 2,520 P-51s to all causes, including accidents, ground fire, and enemy fighters. The 1.96 to 1 kill ratio was impressive, but more significant was the strategic impact. Mustangs destroyed German fighter aviation's ability to defend the Reich, enabling strategic bombing that crippled German war production. The human cost of Mustang operations affected both sides profoundly. American fighter pilots faced death every mission, knowing German flak and fighters could kill them over enemy territory, where capture meant prison camp at best. Yet morale remained high, because pilots flew aircraft that gave them fighting chance. P-51 pilots survived being shot down at rates approaching 50% due to aircraft toughness and Allied rescue operations. German pilots, by contrast, died at appalling rates. By late 1944, average German fighter pilot life expectancy was 30 combat sorties. Few survived long enough to become aces. The psychological warfare aspect of Mustang operations was deliberate and effective. American fighters painted bright colors, nose art, and victory markings, flying in formations that emphasized their numbers. German pilots, looking up to see 400 Mustangs escorting bombers, understood they faced impossible odds. Some German units suffered morale collapse, with pilots refusing combat or developing psychosomatic illnesses. The bravery of German fighter pilots, who continued fighting despite hopeless odds, deserves recognition, but their courage couldn't overcome material and numerical inferiority. The final months of the war saw Mustangs ranging across Germany with virtual impunity, strafing trains, airfields, and vehicles while escorting bombers that faced minimal fighter opposition. German air defenses collapsed not from lack of aircraft or pilots, though both were scarce, but from accumulated losses that broke the Luftwaffes to coordinate effective resistance. By April 1945, Mustangs were shooting down aircraft on training flights and destroying planes on the ground because Luftwaffe couldn't risk massing fighters for coordinated defense. Major Heinz Baer survived his March 1944 encounter with Lieutenant Goodson's Mustang and continued flying until war's end, adding to his 204 victories and surviving being shot down 18 times. In post-war interviews, he consistently identified the Mustang as the weapon that destroyed Luftwaffe fighter effectiveness. The Mustang ended our supremacy over German airspace. It could escort bombers anywhere, fight on equal or superior terms with our best fighters, and had those devastating 6.50 caliber guns that shredded aircraft. Once Mustangs appeared in numbers, we were fighting a losing battle. Every mission might be our last, and usually was for someone. The strategic lesson of the Mustang extended beyond World War II into the jet age. The principle it established, that achieving air superiority enables all other operations, became foundation of modern air doctrine. The U.S. Air Force was created partly based on strategic bombing theory, that Mustangs had validated by making daylight precision bombing possible. Every modern fighter carries forward the Mustang's legacy: range to escort attackers, performance to defeat enemy fighters, and firepower to kill opponents quickly. The 6.50 caliber machine guns that punched through German cockpits represented American firepower philosophy perfected: volume of fire over hitting power per round, sustained firepower over limited but powerful armament, and reliability over maximum performance. This philosophy won because American industry could produce ammunition in quantities that made sustained fire practical. German cannon were more destructive per hit, but .50 caliber machine guns got more hits, and enough hits destroyed any aircraft. In the end, when German aces challenged Mustangs and discovered 6.50s punching through their cockpits, they were learning the hardest lesson of industrial warfare. Individual skill cannot overcome systematic advantages in equipment, training, and resources. The Luftwaffe had better pilots in 1940. By 1944, American pilots were better trained, flew better aircraft, had unlimited fuel and ammunition, and operated as part of a system that multiplied individual effectiveness. The Mustang was the weapon that made this system lethal, destroying German fighter aviation through superior performance backed by overwhelming industrial capacity. The legacy endures in every air combat engagement since 1944. The side with air superiority wins. Achieving air superiority requires fighters that can escort deep penetration missions, engage enemy fighters with confidence of victory, and operate in numbers that overwhelm defenses. The P-51 Mustang established this template, and its 6.50 caliber machine guns wrote the lesson in shredded German cockpits across the skies of Europe.